Pacific Ocean, May 1943. The steel deck of the USS Essex trembles beneath aviation mechanic Everett Red Landman's boots as he watches the horizon swallow the last traces of American coastline. The 27,000-ton carrier cuts through Pacific swells like a knife through silk, her 4 massive steam turbines pushing her toward a destiny that will reshape naval warfare forever. But 2,000 miles away, in the headquarters of Japan's combined fleet, Admiral Ozawa stares at intelligence reports with the confidence of a man who believes he holds the winning hand. His weathered fingers trace across photographs of American shipyards, those massive Essex-Class carriers rolling off production lines like automobiles. 24 of them, the reports say. Ozawa allows himself a thin smile. "Let them come," he murmurs to his staff officers. "Numbers mean nothing without skill." Ozawa has spent his entire career mastering the art of carrier warfare. His pilots, the legendary naval aviators who stunned the world at Pearl Harbor, represent decades of rigorous training and combat experience. These Americans, with their factory-fresh ships and hastily trained pilots, surely cannot match the precision and dedication of the Imperial Japanese Navy. The morning sun glints off Essex's flight deck as Red Landman secures another F6F Hellcat fighter, its 50 caliber machine guns loaded and ready. He doesn't know it yet, but he's standing on the weapon that will single-handedly destroy Japanese naval aviation. The Essex-class carriers aren't just ships. They're floating cities of destruction, each one carrying 90 aircraft and 3,000 men into battle. As Essex steams toward her first combat deployment, Ozawa continues planning what he believes will be the decisive battle that saves the Japanese Empire. His strategy is elegant. Use land-based aircraft to weaken the American fleet, then unleash his carrier forces in a coordinated strike that will send these upstart Essex carriers to the bottom of the Pacific. What neither man realizes is that they're about to witness the most lopsided naval aviation battle in history. The Americans aren't just bringing more ships, they're bringing a completely different approach to warfare. While Japanese pilots train for 6 months before combat, American aviators spend 2 years mastering their craft. While Japanese carriers focus on offense over defense, Essex-class ships are armored fortresses designed to survive anything the enemy can throw at them. The question that will haunt Admiral Ozawa for the rest of his life is already forming in the salt spray and diesel fumes of the Pacific. How do you defeat an enemy who can build 24 aircraft carriers in the time it takes you to train a single pilot? Red Landman secures his last aircraft and heads below deck, unaware that he's about to participate in the systematic destruction of Japanese naval power. The Essex is steaming toward a collision with history, and Japan's naval aviation will never recover from the impact. The transformation begins not with battle, but with an industrial revolution that Japan's leaders fundamentally misunderstand. While Admiral Ozawa calculates aircraft numbers and pilot experience, American shipyards are rewriting the rules of naval warfare itself. In Newport News, Philadelphia, Brooklyn, Norfolk, and Braintree, the sound of riveting guns echoes 24 hours a day. Each Essex-class carrier requires 2.5 million man-hours to build, but American workers are completing them in as little as 14 months. The USS Yorktown, named after the carrier sunk at Midway, slides down the ways in January 1943. 3 months later, USS Lexington follows. By summer, Essex herself is ready for combat. But Ozawa sees only the surface of this industrial miracle. Intelligence reports cross his desk showing American carriers massing in the Pacific, and he interprets the numbers through the lens of Japanese naval doctrine. Quantity over quality, he tells his staff dismissively. They're rushing these ships into service with inexperienced crews and undertrained pilots. We'll destroy them one by one. What Ozawa doesn't understand, what no Japanese leader fully grasps, is that these aren't just more carriers. They're evolutionary leaps forward in naval technology. Each Essex-class ship displaces 31,300 tons fully loaded, protected by 4 inches of special treatment steel armor. Their flight decks can handle 2 squadrons spotted for takeoff, while a 3rd squadron warms up on the hangar deck below. Most critically, they carry 240,000 gallons of aviation fuel, enough for extended combat operations that will exhaust Japanese defenses. Red Landman discovers the Essex's capabilities firsthand during her shakedown cruise in March 1943. Standing on the flight deck, as Captain Donald Duncan puts the ship through her paces, he watches F6F Hellcats launch from steam catapults with bomb loads that would have been impossible on earlier carriers. The new fighters are heavier than Japanese Zeros, but they're also faster, better armored, and equipped with 6 .50 caliber machine guns that can shred lightweight Japanese aircraft. These planes are built like tanks, Landman tells his crew chief, running his hand along a Hellcat's reinforced wing. The Japs have never seen anything like this. Meanwhile, in Japanese training facilities, a desperate shortage of experienced instructors forces the Imperial Navy to graduate pilots after just 6 months of preparation. Lieutenant Saburo Sakai, one of Japan's top aces, watches green recruits struggle with basic formation flying and feels a chill of premonition. "These boys aren't ready for combat," he confides to a fellow pilot, "but what choice do we have?" The Americans, by contrast, spend 2 years training each naval aviator. At Pensacola and Corpus Christi, future carrier pilots log hundreds of hours in advanced fighters, learning not just to fly, but to think tactically. They practice carrier landings until they can set down on a pitching deck in any weather. Most importantly, they train against realistic opposition, sparring with instructors who push them to their limits. By August 1943, the disparity becomes clear to anyone willing to see it. Essex launches her first combat mission against Marcus Island, a relatively minor target chosen specifically to test the new carrier's capabilities. The results are devastating for Japanese defenders. Wave after wave of Hellcats and Helldiver bombers pound the island's airfield, destroying every aircraft on the ground and demolishing defensive positions with surgical precision. Admiral Ozawa reads the battle reports from Marcus Island with growing unease. The Americans achieved complete tactical surprise despite Japanese radar warnings. Their pilots flew with a precision and coordination that suggested extensive training. Most troubling of all, they suffered almost no losses while inflicting catastrophic damage on Japanese forces. But Ozawa pushes aside his doubts. Marcus Island was a minor engagement, he tells himself. When the main American fleet ventures within range of Japanese land-based aircraft and carrier forces, the outcome will be very different. His plan remains sound. Lure the Essex carriers into a trap where they'll face coordinated attacks from multiple directions. What Ozawa doesn't know is that American intelligence has broken Japanese naval codes. Every message he sends, every operational plan he develops, lands on Admiral Raymond Spruance's desk within hours. The Americans aren't walking into a trap. They're preparing to spring one of their own. Red Landman feels the tension building as Essex steams toward the Mariana Islands in June 1944. The ship's ready rooms buzz with intelligence briefings about Japanese fleet movements. Pilots study photographs of enemy carriers, memorizing silhouettes and capabilities. In the hangar bay, mechanics work around the clock to ensure every aircraft is combat ready. The morning of June 19, 1944, dawns clear and hot over the Philippine Sea. On Essex's bridge, radar operators track Japanese aircraft formations approaching from the west, massive raids that represent the cream of Admiral Ozawa's remaining pilot strength. This is the moment both sides have been preparing for, the decisive carrier battle that will determine control of the Pacific. Admiral Ozawa stands on his flagship's bridge, watching his aircraft disappear toward the horizon. He's committed everything to this attack. 474 of his best remaining pilots flying against what he believes are inexperienced American defenders. Victory here will cripple the Essex carriers and give Japan breathing room to rebuild her naval forces. Neither Ozawa nor his pilots realize they're flying toward the most lopsided aerial massacre in naval history. The Great Marianas Turkey Shoot is about to begin, and Japanese naval aviation will never recover from what happens next. June 19, 1944, 8:30 a.m., Philippine Sea. Admiral Ozawa's voice cuts through the humid morning air on his flagship's bridge. Launch the first raid. 69 Japanese aircraft, fighters, bombers, and torpedo planes lift off from his carriers and form up at 20,000 feet. Ozawa watches them disappear toward the horizon with the satisfaction of a chess master making his opening move. But 150 miles away, Lieutenant Joseph Eggert sits in front of the most advanced radar system in the Pacific Ocean. The USS Lexington's Combat Information Center hums with electronic precision as green blips appear on his scope, a massive formation of incoming aircraft still 90 minutes from contact. "Hey, Rube!" Eggert barks into his microphone, the old circus cry for help. Within minutes, the call echoes across every Essex-Class carrier in Task Force 58. Engines roar to life as more than 200 F6F Hellcats scramble from flight decks, their pilots grim-faced and ready. Red Landman watches from Bunker Hill's hangar deck as fighters streak overhead in perfect formation. These aren't the desperate, hastily trained pilots Admiral Ozawa imagines. They're veterans with 2 years of intensive training, flying aircraft that outclass anything in the Japanese arsenal. The first contact comes 55 miles from the American fleet. Lieutenant Commander Charles Brewer of the Essex locks onto a Japanese formation leader at 800 feet and opens fire. His 50 caliber machine guns tear through the lightweight Zero's fuselage like paper. The Japanese pilot never knows what hit him. His aircraft simply disintegrates in a ball of flame and aluminum debris. Brewer barely has time to register his first kill before lining up a second target. Another burst of gunfire. Another Japanese aircraft spinning toward the ocean. Then a third. Within minutes, he's downed 4 enemy planes while his wingmen account for 3 more. This scene repeats across the sky as American pilots encounter Japanese aviators who simply aren't prepared for the intensity of modern combat. The Japanese formation, which should have maintained tight discipline and coordinated attacks, fragments into individual aircraft trying desperately to reach their targets. Aboard his flagship, Admiral Ozawa receives increasingly frantic radio messages from his pilots. "Heavy fighter opposition," screams one voice. "Can't break through," shouts another. Then silence as American Hellcats methodically destroy his carefully planned raid. Lieutenant Stanley Vrachyiu of the Lexington becomes the day's highest scorer, shooting down 6 Japanese aircraft in a single engagement. As he lines up his first target, a dive bomber approaching at low level, he radios back to his carrier. "Don't see how we can possibly shoot them all down. Too many." But that's exactly what happens. The Japanese formation, trained to fight individual duels against maneuverable opponents, encounters a wall of heavily armed American fighters that tear through their ranks with mechanical precision. Vrachyiu splashes 5 dive bombers in rapid succession, his aircraft shuddering under the recoil of 6 50 caliber machine guns. The few Japanese aircraft that survive the fighter screen face an even more terrifying challenge: Vice Admiral Willis Lee's battle line of battleships and cruisers. As the remaining enemy planes approach, American gunners unleash a curtain of anti-aircraft fire so dense it appears solid. 5-inch shells with proximity fuses explode in perfectly timed airburst patterns, creating a killing field that no aircraft can survive. On the Lexington's bridge, correspondent Noel Bush watches in fascination as tracers from two cruisers seem to grab a diving Japanese bomber like two arms reaching up. The aircraft simply disappears in a violent explosion, its fragments scattering across the ocean surface. Admiral Ozawa's second raid fares even worse. 128 aircraft launch from his carriers, but 8 must return immediately due to engine problems. As the formation passes over his own advance guard, trigger-happy gunners mistake them for American attackers and shoot down 2 more Japanese planes while damaging 8 others so severely they can't continue. The remaining aircraft encounter the same buzzsaw of American fighters that destroyed the first raid. This time, Lieutenant Don Gordon of the Lexington demonstrates the technological gap between Japanese and American naval aviation. Spotting 4 Japanese torpedo bombers flying at 15,000 feet, he ignores their Zero escorts and dives straight into the formation. Gordon's first burst of gunfire sends 1 torpedo bomber cartwheeling into the sea. He pursues the others as they take evasive action, methodically shooting down 2 more aircraft, while American anti-aircraft fire from the ships below creates towering waterspouts around him. The 4th Japanese pilot, apparently having seen enough, flees toward the horizon. By 11:30 a.m., Admiral Ozawa's first 2 raids have been annihilated. Of 197 aircraft committed to battle, only 31 returned to their carriers. The Americans have lost exactly 22 planes, most to operational accidents rather than enemy action. But Ozawa refuses to accept the evidence of disaster. He launches a 3rd raid of 47 aircraft, then a 4th with 82 planes. The results are catastrophic. More than half the pilots in the 3rd raid become lost and never find the American fleet, returning to their carriers without having fired a shot. The 4th raid flies directly into American fighters over Guam, where 30 Japanese aircraft are shot down in a matter of minutes. Red Landman watches the aftermath from Bunker Hill's flight deck as American pilots return from what they're already calling the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. Hellcat after Hellcat touches down with victory rolls and triumphant radio calls. One pilot yells to his wingman, "Why hell? It was just like an old-time turkey shoot down home." The phrase spreads across the fleet within hours. In a single day, Admiral Ozawa has lost 374 of his 430 carrier aircraft, the cream of Japanese naval aviation destroyed in 4 waves of systematic slaughter. His remaining carriers steam back toward Japan as hollow shells, their flight decks empty, their purpose negated. But the day isn't over. At 3:32 p.m., a spark ignites aviation fuel vapors aboard Ozawa's flagship Taiho. The massive explosion tears through the carrier's hull, and within minutes she's sliding beneath the Pacific waves. 1,500 men go down with her, including many of the staff officers who planned this disastrous battle. An hour later, the veteran carrier Shokaku, survivor of Pearl Harbor and hero of early Japanese victories, takes 4 torpedo hits from the American submarine Kavala. More than 2,200 men die as she follows Taiho to the bottom. Admiral Ozawa, rescued by a destroyer, stares back at the oil slicks marking his sunken flagships. In a single day, he's lost 3 aircraft carriers, nearly 600 aircraft, and over 3,000 men. The American Essex carriers haven't suffered a single major hit. The Battle of the Philippine Sea is over, but its significance extends far beyond the immediate tactical results. Japanese naval aviation, the force that terrorized the Pacific in 1941 and 1942, has been destroyed as an effective fighting force. The pilots lost today cannot be replaced. The experience and expertise accumulated over decades of training has vanished beneath the Pacific swells. Admiral Ozawa writes in his flag log that evening, "Surviving carrier air power, 35 operational aircraft. It's the epitaph for Japanese naval aviation and the birth certificate of American naval supremacy in the Pacific. The Essex-class carriers have passed their ultimate test. They've faced the best Japan could offer and emerged victorious through superior technology, better trained pilots, and overwhelming industrial strength. From this moment forward, the Pacific belongs to America. The morning after the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, Red Landman stands on Bunker Hill's flight deck watching the sun rise over a Pacific Ocean that has fundamentally changed. The wreckage of Japanese aircraft still floats on the swells. Fragments of wings, cockpit glass, and life jackets that tell the story of naval aviation's most decisive day. But for Landman and thousands of other Americans serving aboard Essex-class carriers, the real test still lies ahead. The Japanese may have lost their offensive capability, but they're about to discover new levels of desperation that will push American naval defenses to their limits. 11 months later, on May 11, 1945, Landman is working on an F4 Corsair in Bunker Hill's hangar bay when two Japanese kamikaze pilots sacrifice their lives in an attempt to sink his ship. The massive explosions kill 373 men and wound 264 more, casualties that would have sunk any lesser vessel. But the Essex-class design philosophy proves its worth in the flames and chaos that follow. "We didn't have time to think about it," Landman recalls decades later, his voice still steady despite the memories. "We lost almost 400 guys, but the ship, she never quit fighting." Bunker Hill's survival exemplifies the revolutionary durability that sets Essex-class carriers apart from their predecessors. While Japanese carriers prioritize speed and offensive power, American naval architects have built floating fortresses capable of absorbing tremendous punishment and continuing operations. The 4 inches of special treatment steel armor, compartmentalized design, and redundant systems allow Essex carriers to survive attacks that would cripple other ships. Even as kamikaze pilots crash into Essex-class flight decks throughout 1945, not a single carrier is lost. The Franklin suffers over 800 casualties when 2 bombs trigger catastrophic explosions among armed aircraft, but she returns to port under her own power. The Intrepid survives 4 separate kamikaze attacks, earning the nickname the Fighting Eye for her resilience. This durability reflects a fundamental difference in naval philosophy that Admiral Ozawa and his staff never fully understood. While Japanese designers focus on creating the most powerful possible attack platform, Americans build carriers designed to win prolonged campaigns through superior logistics and survivability. Each Essex-class ship carries enough aviation fuel, ammunition, and spare parts to conduct extended operations far from friendly bases. The Battle of Leyte Gulf in October 1944 demonstrates this strategic advantage on a massive scale. 4 Essex-class carriers, Essex, Franklin, Intrepid, and Cabot, participate in the largest naval battle in history, their aircraft helping to sink 26 Japanese warships, including the super battleship Musashi. Lieutenant Commander James Ramage, diving through heavy anti-aircraft fire to bomb Japanese carriers, watches his target burning from asshole to appetite, as his gunner so eloquently puts it. The sinking of Musashi, the largest and most heavily armed battleship ever built, by aircraft from Essex-class carriers, symbolizes the complete revolution in naval warfare that these ships represent. Battleships, once the ultimate expression of naval power, have become targets for carrier-based bombers operating from platforms that can move faster and strike farther than any gun-armed vessel. By war's end, the statistics tell a story of overwhelming American naval supremacy built on Essex-class foundations. 24 carriers completed between 1942 and 1950, participating in every major Pacific campaign from the Gilbert Islands to Okinawa. Their aircraft account for thousands of Japanese planes destroyed, hundreds of ships sunk, and countless ground targets neutralized. But the human cost of this technological triumph extends beyond American casualties to include the Japanese pilots who died in hopeless battles against superior opposition. Many of these young men, some with less than 6 months of training, never had a realistic chance of survival against American pilots with 2 years of intensive preparation flying superior aircraft. The Essex-Class carriers continue serving long after Japan's surrender, their adaptable design allowing them to operate jet aircraft during the Korean War and early Vietnam conflict. The last of the class, USS Lexington, doesn't retire until 1991, nearly 50 years after the first ship entered service. 4 Essex-Class carriers remain today as museum ships in New York, South Carolina, Texas, and California, testaments to the industrial might that won the Pacific War. Red Landman, who survived Bunker Hill's kamikaze attack and lived to age 100, represents the human face of this technological revolution. His Bronze Star citation reads simply, "For heroic achievement while serving aboard USS Bunker Hill during action against enemy Japanese forces." But the real heroism lies in the thousands of Americans who sailed these floating cities into harm's way, confident that American industrial might and technological superiority would see them through. The Essex-Class carriers didn't just win the Pacific War. They redefined what it means to project naval power across vast ocean distances. Today's nuclear-powered supercarriers trace their lineage directly back to these revolutionary ships that taught the world a simple lesson. In modern warfare, the nation that can build the best technology fastest will ultimately prevail. The question Admiral Ozawa asked himself in defeat, "How do you fight an enemy with such overwhelming industrial capacity?" remains relevant today as nations compete for technological superiority in an increasingly complex world. What do you think? Could any Navy today match America's Essex-Class production miracle of building 24 fleet carriers in 8 years? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories of World War II's most decisive battles.